Hello, it is Friday, May 12th, 2023 at 10:22 a.m. Eastern Time, USA. I'm Mitch Miller. This is my video journal. I don't have much today. I didn't take any notes down, the things I thought of to talk about. A quick update on the 2000 Ford Explorer that my grandfather gave to me with his custom paint job on the sides of different wildlife animals. I think I mentioned that the anti-lock brakes would kick in at the last 10 or 15 feet of a complete stop. So the vehicle would brake fine until you got to the last 10 feet before you come to a complete stop, and then the anti-lock brakes would ratchet out and the vehicle would go a lot, well, somewhat further than what it would if you just had regular braking to come to a complete stop. Talked with Ken Bryan's brother, Danny, who lives right next door to my parents in Utica. He moved up too after Ken did. He drives a 98 Explorer. I asked him if he had any issue with his anti-lock brakes. He said, yeah, I just unplugged them. So there's a cluster of brake lines and a computer plug that plugs into them. That's the cube is what he called it. That's the anti-lock braking system. He unplugged it for me. He said your anti-lock brake light will be on, but other than that it should work fine. Took it for a test drive and it did work fine. It brakes normally now. So it just goes to show you that putting computers in all these vehicles could be dangerous. As I said, I had to plan a little bit further ahead to come to a complete stop. You could see how that could affect parallel parking, smashing into cars, coming to a stop at a stop sign and ending up out in the intersection because you didn't plan ahead enough. As I said, braking put you about half of a car length further out than what you normally would just with normal brakes. That's enough to hang out into a intersection, get smashed, T-boned, and killed. So I am literally driving, I'm going to drive it down on Sunday, a vehicle that displays how once a computer starts malfunctioning in a vehicle, it becomes a hazard and dangerous. So if any government, state or federal government agency would like to understand what's going to happen when all of these computers and all these autonomous features and semi-autonomous features in these vehicles start malfunctioning. I have a 2000 vehicle that had a semi-autonomous feature, namely the brakes wouldn't lock up and skid and cause a stop to go further on snow and ice and things like that. It was a computerized system that ratchets the brakes out to keep friction and the wheels turning instead of locking up in bad weather or on an extreme stop. This semi-autonomous feature is malfunctioning in the vehicle. We overrode that function and now the braking system works fine, but in these more complex computerized vehicles it might not be as simple as unplugging the plug. And the plug has like 15 or 50 pins in it, so it's a pretty complex older 2000 computer system. So as I said, you just put the information out there in the atmosphere and things naturally come to you to help you prove your point, and that's one I have. So I'm no longer hoping that it gets stolen and converted into a electric vehicle. I would like to convert it to an electric vehicle with that special paint job after this next year of driving it. Maybe Counts Customs would be interested in the project and in the project of Racing for Change, where we convert a bunch of old vehicles. He seems like a cool guy out in Vegas. Maybe he would sponsor this computer platform where we propose in Fem Party, where we figure out every viable vehicle we could make from junked vehicles sitting around, especially in the southern states where they're not rusted out. Interesting concept for a car company. I proposed some car company ideas. So something to look into if Hollywood would get off their ass and contact me. Alright, the second thing I want to talk about is my 91-year-old Grandpa Miller. He was going to go out turkey hunting by himself, but my parents let his Straight Talk wireless pay-as-you-go phone, little flip phone, run out of service time back in January. So I called TracFone, which is affiliated with Straight Talk, and tried to refill the minutes. I called to see if the phone was, they thought it was outdated for the 5G network. It wasn't, turned out it was not, but it might have been. I tried to get it refilled. I got disconnected from my parents' landline twice from this, from the operator, or from the customer service agent trying to help me. Finally, I called from my cell phone, and we could not figure out the EIN number of the phone. It was not under the battery. It was not in the settings. It was just an older LG phone that just did not have that number, I guess. So we were not able to refill the minutes on it. So then yesterday I drove to Walmart to compare. I wanted to get a phone on the AT&T network because the AT&T network works better in Utica and its surrounding areas. So I was looking at Cricket and AT&T, but all their pay-as-you-go are $30 a month. You have to buy a $30 charge card every month. So I thought, oh, maybe I can add a line to my Cricket account where I have unlimited data and everything for my personal phone. Just add a line, maybe $5-10 for Grandpa. Again, he would just need it for 911. He doesn't need it, 400 minutes would last him a year. He doesn't use it. He just could call his sons in an emergency and get help, and then hopefully we could get close to his location using the location services on it if he was out in the woods. He doesn't need data. He doesn't really need texting. So I went over to the Cricket store right next to the Walmart. I asked if there was a plan like that. She said no, the cheapest plan we have has all these data and everything, and it would be $30 a month to add to your plan. So I said, I can't believe the wireless companies don't have an option for elderly people to have a little cheap flip phone just for emergencies. And that's the scam, right? That's the ultimate scam, that they're scamming old people. These old people don't qualify for the benefits subsidization programs like Obama Phone and stuff like that because they have their retirement savings, and many of them don't qualify to get a cheaper plan. Now, she did say at Cricket there's a company called Jitterbug designed specifically for elderly people, and it's like $15 a month, but that's still $180 a year. And the other plans are $360 a year. I ended up buying a TracFone, which is the Verizon network. Doesn't work that great in Utica. 1 year service plan with 400 minutes for $99 and a $20 Nokia phone. So I got out of it for about $130 for the year. And each subsequent year it should only be around $100. That's the cheapest deal I could find, but that's the scam, right? You have these elderly people, they get these pendants, these life alert systems in their house. My grandpa has one and only works up to 100 yards from the base unit. That's why he needs this cell phone if he's going to venture out in the woods. But that's kind of the scam, right? Like, you could have a small, like a little flip phone that you connect to a lanyard that old people could wear around their necks instead of the life alert, right? They could have free internet, as I propose, free Wi-Fi in their house. Right, I've proposed free internet so that we can read every insane law that the government's ever written. The only way to do that is if you have free internet at your house. So if the cell phone didn't work on the cell network, you'd have Wi-Fi for it. Most elderly people live in places where the cell network does work. So they wouldn't even need the internet or the Wi-Fi. A lot of people don't have internet. You carry that around, you flip it open if you fall, you dial 911 directly. And I think 911 and the police would agree that going through the Life Alert, going through these other providers for safety apps and stuff like that, it's much better just to call 911 directly. So why don't we have a system in place where elderly people can flip open a phone and dial 911? Or just hold one button, you show them. And I think most cell phones are equipped with that. You hold one or whatever it is, and that's the emergency button, and that's 911. Just like holding a pendant button. Right? So why is this not a service available to elderly people? Right? Then they can go anywhere and call 911. They just need to get used to wearing a cell phone around their neck. So that's why it's important for us to come together and stand up to the wireless companies. Right? I've proposed this moratorium based off of this helicopter crash. Hey, this is the last generation of cell network we're going to allow for some time until we figure this all out. But if the elderly came together, if we started a movement and the elderly came together and said, look, I shake because of old age, but it could be because I've been exposed to radio waves when I was a kid and wireless waves my whole life, and now I shake. I have Alzheimer's, I have all these ailments, and it could be because of the wireless waves. We want transparency in the wireless industry, right? I'm all for transparency. I proposed Transparency and Importation Act. That's where we start with transparency with companies outside of the United States that are selling their goods in the U.S. market. They have to be totally transparent as to their pay structure, what they pay individuals, so on and so forth, right? No new tax, no new import levy, just transparency through a standardized platform. Then maybe other countries require the United States to be that transparent, at least to their country. It doesn't have to be to the United States, although that could be published, and shared. So that's how we get the ball rolling on trend. So if I were to start to target one industry that should be totally transparent, and I've proposed Anticor to be transparent if you make a mistake as a corporate executive, corporate board. Right, that's another mode to getting transparency domestically in the United States. But, you have to wait around till they make a big mess, a big oil spill or whatever, and then you have to count on the media upsetting the people enough about it that it becomes a major issue that then they have to adapt and be transparent, right? They've been paying to sweep things under the rug from the media companies for years. As a matter of fact, Ken Bryan gave me insight into that a while back, and this is again why I support him, because he worked in the media, and he said, these newspapers and stuff, if you want to bury a story, what they do is they figure out, here's however many $1 million the Post-Gazette will make off of advertising this day or this week, and if we run the story, they'll make this much off of advertising. And the company that wants to kill the story says, okay, we'll buy that much amount of advertising off of you if you bury this story, if you don't run the story, right? So it's capitalism at its finest. That's how it works. There's a metric. Here's how much advertising we make that daily, and the company says, all right, we'll pay that amount of we'll buy that amount of advertising off of you. Doesn't mean that all the ads on that day are going to be from them, but they'll buy that amount over a week or a month or whatever. And that's how you kill a story. Right? So all these companies are going to invest more in the burying stories in the media so that they don't have to become transparent. So the anti-core is a good start, but you need a transparent media, and that's why I'd be good at the FCC. And another thing I would do at the FCC, and this is where I'm going with this, and why I should be at the FCC, is we target one industry. Look, wireless companies could be causing mental illness, migraines, autism, so on and so forth. So all these groups, along with the elderly, come together and say, we want transparency in the wireless industry. Break it down for us without expanding to another generation of wireless. Not the costs. We want to see what it costs to expand to the 6G wireless network. But in separate from that, we want a piecemeal breakdown. What does it actually cost for one iPhone with unlimited data, text, and talk? What does it actually cost per month to provide that phone with the wireless services? Is it $10, $15, $20? I pay $55 a month for that service. What does it actually cost? And you can break it down and say, well, if you use 10 gigs of data, this is what it would cost. If you use 20 gigs of data a month, this is what it costs, so on and so forth. But most people hook up to their home Wi-Fi, so they're not using a ton of gigs unless they're streaming. Some people stream movies and stuff, you know. Then we want to break down, what does it cost for a little flip phone with no data and maybe text and talk? What does that cost per month to provide the service to that, and some location service, which the app companies pay for anyway because they want to spy on you? So that's probably not, you know, you play that in. How much do the app companies pay into your wireless company? So on and so forth. So how much does that cost? Is it $5 a month? $2 a month? How much does it cost with just talk? And the person uses 30 minutes of talk time per month. And they just have talk on a cell phone. They're able to call 911. They're able to call some of their family members if they're out at the store. They don't talk a long time on these things. How much does it cost for 30 minutes a month talk to provide that service to that little flip phone? Is it $2 a month? Fine. Me as a grandson, my grandfather gave me his truck. I'll put him on my plan for $5 a month and buy the phone. Right? So these people over 70 that barely use the phone, don't know how to use them, and we lock in, here's the one flip phone. Maybe it's Nokia, whatever. This is the one flip phone that works for the next 10 years that every elderly person has, so that they don't have to get new phones every 2 years and figure out the menu settings and everything. Once they figure out how to use it, it's there. We're not changing the model. That model will work. Right? It's locked in. We want to lock this in so that someone from the age of 70 to 95 can use the same phone and not get confused, because they didn't grow up with all these different menus and all these different software and all this different things like my generation did. They don't if you change one thing, one little icon in their menu setting, that's something they have to wrap their mind around and figure out. It's like a whole different computer system for them, and they weren't trained on computer systems. Right? They can figure out the menu on their TV, kind of. So that's what I'm trying to do here. Whether it's bringing all these people, these mentally ill, the autism, the migraine people, the elderly together to bring transparency to this industry so that we can have a simple $5 or $10 plan for our elderly people, and they don't have to pay $50 a month for Life Alert or whatever that is, right? The scam of Life Alert and the wireless companies in collusion with each other. So bringing these people together to demand transparency in the wireless industry, or I could just be hired at the FCC and tasked with enforcing transparency in the wireless industry, right? And getting the Congress motivated to pass some kind of act for transparency in the wireless industry, and continuing my freedom of speech. Even as an employee of the FCC, I continue my podcast, I continue my efforts to bring awareness to the fact that wireless waves could cause mental illness, could cause shaking in Alzheimer's and elderly people, could cause a lot of things, and we just haven't done the studies. So the wireless companies are going to come back and fund studies that disprove that, but we can push for transparency and it'll make things a lot simpler and say we'll live with it, but it should be free for elderly people, should be free for the mentally ill, should be free for families with people with autism, people with migraines, but the first step to that is getting transparency to say, all right, for us that qualify, it's $5 a month or whatever. So I propose this on my podcast, how universities could take over the wireless distribution and take the profit motive out of it. But the first step is to go after these profit-driven companies and make them provide transparency without incorporating into their business plan setting up the towers for the next generation. Take that out of the equation. What does it cost to just have 5G data on a smartphone? What does it cost to have a flip phone that runs on the 5G data or whatever the 4G data? You know, break it down. So that's my major proposal. I did get a little long-winded on this. I didn't have much to talk about, but this is important stuff. You know, if our elderly people are getting scammed, it's safety. I mean, how many elderly people die a year? If they had a cell phone around their neck, they would have been able to just call 911. How many had complications because they had to go through Life Alert, which was a relay to 911, the release of information, so on and so forth, and it took an extra 10 or 15 minutes where they had brain damage because their heart stopped or their lungs stopped, and they could have lived a couple more years of life with full cognizance had they just been able to, well, I guess in the case of a heart stopping, they wouldn't be able to dial 911, but they wouldn't also be able to hit the Life Alert thing. But maybe in their first stages of a heart attack, they can hold the button on the cell phone and call 911. So something to think about, the complications, because the wireless industry doesn't care about elderly people and they're scamming them for as much money as possible. So I'll end with that. Zelda's in the background up here. Zelda, say hi. Say hi, girl. What do you think? Time to wrap it up. She's my podcast producer and she's also my video journal producer. Alright, Zelda, I'll wrap it up, girl. She says wrap it up. Join me next time. Possibly next week sometime. But I work Monday through Wednesday, so I don't know when I'll have alone time to do it. Thanks for watching.